You're listening to the Sports Cycle with Tim McCain, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing mixed martial artist Tristan Scarborough, 4-2 as a mixed martial artist. He recently had a KO, TKO over Josh Shelter, I believe. Josh Shelter?
Schlussler.
Schlussler.
It's a hard name to pronounce. I'll give you that.
Josh Schlussler. It was a minute and 14 seconds, or a minute and 24 seconds. And I tell you, when you watch this fight, Tristan comes in with the barrage of punches, the uppercut, the uppercut, and he goes to straight punch, it's just amazing what you see. Tristan, when you see Tristan fight, he comes in, and I'm not going to say it's dirty boxing, but I'm gonna tell you, it's an aggressive style of boxing. And if you're not, if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't know how to defend yourself in the trenches, Tristan is coming for you. Tristan, what were your thoughts on the fight going into it, and what was the feeling like knowing that the game plan succeeded?
Right. So I had 3 opponent changes going into this. So me and Josh actually got set up on like last Monday, so fight week.
Wow.
And I ended up bumping up my original fight was supposed to be at 185 pounds. Then it got bumped up to 195. Then it was 200, and something about it just didn't feel right. Like, this guy's not going to show up. So we ended up trying to find a different opponent. We found one, and then we were able to make that for 205, which is easy. I can make that very easily. But it was his first fight. He was an independent, so he didn't have a gym that he was coming out of. So there was no way to gauge what he was going to do. In those situations when you're talking about an independent debut, where you got to really be prepared for anything, because you got nothing to go off of. You don't know if they're going to come in running, swinging wild. You don't know if they're actually super highly skilled, and we just haven't seen them yet. So, the game plan was try to feel it out for the first few seconds, 15, 30 seconds or whatever. So try to just move around, kind of let him do his thing, see what he wanted to do. Then finally, he tried to close the distance with a spinning kick to the body. And when he did that, I was able to hit him once, and I could tell, okay, he's not going to be able to take those kind of shots for too long. So we kind of moved around a little bit, and then my coach called a code that called for that uppercut to come. So I was able to dip, set up the uppercut. When I did, he covered up and, kind of took some of the force off the uppercut, but he didn't know there was a follow-up shot coming. So then I stepped through with a switch stance cross, and it landed flush, and, that was the end of the night.
That was the end of it. So talk about that. He, like you say, you don't know what someone's style is like, especially if you haven't seen them. They're not a part of a gym. But as a fighter, couldn't one also look at that and say, can a fighter almost overlook that and say, oh, well, he doesn't have a gym, he doesn't have, the same experience that I have, I might overlook that fighter? Like, talk about it from that perspective. Can fighters potentially do that with someone who isn't independent because they might not have the same experience, nor do they have a gym?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to look at that and assume, oh, okay, like, he doesn't have, high level training partners on a daily basis. He doesn't have anybody that we know of that's specifically coaching him. He hasn't fought before, so those nerves are going to be in there. The problem with that is, if you do that, you're going ahead and preparing for the best case scenario for you. And then you're not going to be prepared for the worst case scenario, when just because they're an independent doesn't mean that they're not getting in work at a gym. It just means they're not claiming to represent that gym. They could be going to a very good gym 3 times a week. So, I try to think like that. And then, Coach Hobbs and my team, try to keep me grounded. Like, you got to be prepared for whatever could happen. all you can control is what you do, but you have to be prepared for him to be the best you've ever been, or, you know, the other scenario. And I would like to give him a lot of credit, actually. For an independent guy making his debut, he was actually pretty composed in there. He wasn't slinging wild punches, being, you know, dumb. He was being composed, trying to, you know, find his range, find his shots. And it's like I told him, you know, he got hit with a big punch, and, you know, he got dropped, and that was the end of his night. But that doesn't mean that he's not a good fighter or can't be a good fighter. Anybody could get hit with that shot at.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember Floyd Mayweather, he talked about it. He said, you can never overestimate your opponent. No matter how, you know, no matter the credentials you have, no matter the lack of thereof, you never know. And what did Mike Tyson say? He says anyone has a plan, everyone has got a game plan until you get punched in the face. So yeah, you're totally right. So any man who goes into the octagon or in the boxing ring, they deserve a lot of respect, because very few people do what you guys do, especially from a professional or from an amateur perspective. So shout out to both you guys for that. So one of the things that I loved watching you in that fight was after you had that KO TKO victory. Man, you were your own hype man. The energy was there. What were you saying to the crowd? What were you saying to your corner? I'm curious. I want to know, because you were your own hype man at that point.
In terms that I can say during this interview, I was just kind of letting them know that this was my yard. So if you're going to come in my yard, you better be ready.
I love it. I love it. I love it. What are some of the greatest lessons you've learned as a fighter in the past 3 fights that you've had?
Well, you know, before this one, you know, I was coming off of a 2-fight skid against, you know, 2 really, really good opponents. You know, Torres is just an absolute physical freak. And at that point, all I really had to go off was a, you know, 11-second fight that he had, and then some things that you can read up on about his wrestling. But it's really hard to be prepared for something like that without having seen it. So that, you know, that one was tough, and that was my first loss. But in a way, it was kind of one of those things, like, you know, I didn't really have any way to be ready for what was coming. And, you know, my skills weren't there in the grappling department to deal with that. So in a way, that one wasn't too hard to, you know, get over and accept that it happened, because all it showed was, okay, you know, I got to keep growing. And then you move on to the next one. And, you know, I still didn't really have the system around me to get my grappling game where it needed to be. So it gets exposed again. That one's a little bit tougher to accept. Well, I mean, we fast forward down the road, and shortly after that, I moved out here to living in Mooresville and training at Hobbs Jackson Wink in Concord. And, you know, I got great training partners, great coach in Coach Madison Hobbs, and, you know, everything's just kind of taken off, and I feel so much better now. So it was nice to be able to, you know, I only really got to show my striking, which even that was kind of my best attribute before I got there. But even in the minute, you know, 20 that I was in there, I feel like you can see that my striking has grown, and you haven't even been able to see where my grappling is going in that time. So I guess the biggest lesson that I would say that I've learned is to, you know, never accept and be complacent on where you are. Because, you know, at one point I was, you know, 3-0 heading into my first title shot. You know, everybody thinks you're the man. You know, you're knocking out all these people, and then your shortcomings start showing up. You know, you get into these high level fights with, you know, guys who are just absolute specimen, and it's like, oh, he can't wrestle. And then the next opponent's like, yeah, you know, I might not want to strike with him, but I can wrestle and he can't. So then they're going to attack that. So if you accept, like, you know, I got good power and I can knock people out, and you're okay with that, you might be good for a while, but eventually you're going to get figured out. So you got to be constantly trying to get better and grow, asking questions of practice. How can I fix this? How can I get better? And what I really like about my new gym at Hobbs Jackson Wink is, Coach Hobbs is just very intelligent, and he's able to help with like the mental side of things, of trying to understand why we're doing a certain thing instead of another way of doing it, because this way is, smarter and gets the job done in a better, more efficient way.
When did you transition to your new gym?
So funny enough, I moved to Mooresville the day after my last fight. On the way back from Chattanooga, we stopped here, and this is where we moved. It was already planned before the fight that I was going to move, and then I moved out here, and I think it was in like a week I found the gym and I started training there.
And what has the relationship with the trainers, your new training partners, what has that experience been like for you?
It's been really cool. This past fight card was the first time I've ever gotten to fight with another teammate on the card, which was, a whole experience in itself, because, he fought a little bit earlier than me in the card. He, Vincent Van Alstyne is his name. Mm-hmm. You're going to want to have him on here. He's got big things coming. But
yes, sir.
So he got a third round submission to move to 2-0. And when you get that exhilaration of watching your teammate, choke somebody, and then you got to remember your fight's coming up, so you don't want to have the big adrenaline dump. So after he did that, I was excited. I kind of ran to the back, sat down, was like, all right, I got to decompress now, because otherwise I'm going to go in there with a big adrenaline dump. But in terms of the training, it's nice being around other fighters who are, fighting on cards with me, trying to get better, around the same age group. And these guys have less fights than me, but they've been training longer than I have. You got Josiah, who was on the show. He's been training since he was like 11 years old. So while he's only had 2 fights, he's got like almost triple my training experience. So that's the problem with the, you catch the debuter and you think, oh, they've never had a fight before. That does not.
You don't know.
That's what all of their opponents have thought. Like, oh, these guys are debuters. That doesn't mean anything. Vince beat a guy who was 4-3 in his first fight.
Wow.
I mean, they think that you're just getting a debuter and they're not going to be ready for it. Little do they know, some of these guys have been training for so long that it's all they know how to do now.
That's real. That's real. So talk about that adrenaline. One of the things that I'm curious about is you were talking about how you were excited for your partner Vincent, and he was choking someone out, but you talked about how you didn't want to be too excited. Why is it that you cannot be too excited going into that octagon yourself?
Well, two things could happen. You could walk in there on too much of an adrenaline rush, and then that'll just lead you into making sloppy mistakes, because, fighting is an intelligent thinking man's game. You got to be, steps ahead of your opponent if you really want to be successful. That's where, you're working on feints, trying to set certain shots up. That's how knockouts happen. A lot of people think like, oh, big power. There's plenty of guys who don't actually have, crazy one punch power, but they're able to get a lot of knockouts because they're able to set up the perfect shot so often. Look at someone like Israel Adesanya. He's got a lot of knockouts because he sets them up just so perfectly. So on that side of it, you don't want to be too high, but also in that moment, if you let the adrenaline get too high, your body's naturally going to have an adrenaline dump. And, I still got 6 fights and an intermission before I'm fighting. So you don't want to let all of your adrenaline and everything just get to a depleted level. And then, you can't even really muster up the energy to go fight on your own because you just watched your buddy go get it done. You know what I mean? So you gotta find that middle ground. Be excited, but then go settle down and get into your own zone.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Last question. So we see a lot of MMA fighters who are now going into the boxing world, and we see some boxers going into MMA world. Seeing how you have a style like a Thai boxing style, you use your hands a lot. Would you ever consider doing boxing, like an Adrian Soto Perez, who's transitioning both to MMA and boxing?
Yeah, I consider it. I kind of just prefer the MMA world. I like the aspect of it. You can definitely choose to, just do boxing and then you avoid the grappling game on itself. But it just doesn't, I don't like the idea that, you could be the best boxer in the world, but you could get someone like Khabib. And if you two just happen to have a legitimate fight, he could take you down and there wasn't a thing you could do about it.
Nope.
I would never want to be that perspective where, those guys are always going to think of themselves as like the baddest man on the planet. So I would never want to be thinking I'm the baddest man on the planet and there's an entirely different side of the fight game that could, take me out. That's why I like the completeness of the mixed martial arts game is, you got to be proficient at everything and a lot of times be at least great at something to reach the heights that you want in the sport.
Hey, I agree. I remember I was interviewing Justin Harrell, and he said, "Yeah, man, if I were to fight a boxer in the street, I'd just take him down." I'm like,
Yeah.
man, that's crazy. But I just, for me, being a fan of both, I love the sweet science. But you're right. If in the MMA world, you can't just Rampage Jackson was someone who was he used his fist, and what happened when John Bones Jones met with?
Yeah, you'll get taken down, you'll get submitted. I mean, it's not even just the takedown that you got to worry about. You might get tapped out, or you might not know how to defend yourself. You're going to get ground and pounded out.
Exactly. There's so many different ways, and that's what makes MMA world so beautiful is that there's different styles, different. And I think for a fighter, okay, my question to you is because you say you need to be proficient in everything, but it's kind of tough because even the fight style that you are good at or dominant at, there's so many aspects of that that people are still learning. So in essence, how many fight styles do you think an actual fighter actually has or she has in their back pocket? How many fight styles do you have in your back pocket that you can use currently against an opponent?
I mean, I like to think, I try to come out with, an aggressive style, trying to land punches because that's my, quickest and easiest path to victory. But if I need to, in my back pocket, you're learning how to counter strike, how to defend and move, really use your leg kicks to then set up the hands. And that's kind of where I would go, you know, in the future might have to start off with the leg kicks to set the hands up because you can only go for so long. And that's kind of what happened with when I moved into the Torres fight was, everybody knows that, I'm coming with a very boxing style approach and they're going to formulate their game plan based off of that, which is what he did. He was able to time my punches to land successful takedowns, which was a great game plan from his part that, I really should have been ready for, but it is what it is.
Yes, sir. That sounds like a rematch in the making, man. You mentioned Torres a lot. I think that would be a good thing to see, potentially a rematch between the two of y'all.
I don't know. Torres is actually he's gonna be making his pro debut soon. But it's funny. I would at this level, I would love to be able to, spar Torres because we've become really good friends. But especially in the beginning of our careers, that's not something I would really be looking for solely because, we both be on the climb trying to get to a certain place. And with someone that I consider such a friend, regardless of how it would, I wouldn't want to be trying to halt their progress. It wouldn't feel right to me. Just because, we talk a lot and try to help each other be prepared for our fights and stuff like that. I commentated on not his last fight, but the one before. And then he worked commentary for my fight this week. So that was kind of a cool thing.
And you share this podcast on your social media platforms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Shout out to Torres Podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He's got a good podcast going on. Couple of them that he's on. Just
Zero, is it? There's one that's called Zero.
The zero hour is the one for the Aries Fight Series, and then his is the TNT podcast.
Yes, sir. Great podcast. So definitely for the people listening, tune into those and tune into Tristan. And he's saying he's commentating. People need to tune into that, man. That's a whole nother avenue. Talk about that commentating. What is that transition?
Yeah, so I've only got to do it one time thus far, but hopefully in the future I'll get a chance to do it again. But it was fun to work commentary, to be able to sit cage side and be able to just kind of discuss with the people watching what's going on and try to provide some insight into what's happening. I got to Vincent's first fight was on that same card that I commentated on. So to be able to work commentary for your teammates' fight's pretty cool.
Yes.
It adds a little.
Wait, but there's bias in that though, because that's your boy.
Well, luckily he just won really dominantly, so I didn't have to. I didn't have to show any bias. But yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with me and Torres have become pretty good friends. So during his fight, I can't just be like yeah, he's a tank, he's going to destroy this guy, blah, blah, blah. Because, when you're working commentary, and it works the same for Vince and for teammates or anybody that you're close with, if you, only talk about them, you're doing a disservice to the fight, because the viewer is thinking, oh, this guy is like this winning. Good. So winning is only going to, it's not going to give them the same glory that you would want, because they're going to be like, oh, well, the commentary people, only talked about this guy, so of course he won. The other guy must have not been any good. And on the flip side, obviously I hope this never happens, but if you only talk up, your boy or whatever, and then he loses, it looks double as bad, because then you've got, you're losing to a guy that the commentary was acting like isn't any good. Because then they're going to be like, oh, well, he lost to a guy who's not very good, so he must be even worse than that.
Or it exposes the commentator, and because you see that a lot in the professional ranks. They might pick up one fighter over the other, and I'm calling out some of the commentators by saying this, but you see it, and so you have athletes like Shannon Sharp, who says like when he watches football, he actually turns down everything, so he doesn't have any bias, because the thing about journalism is supposed to be objective, and like you said, commentating is supposed to be objective. So I appreciate you saying you would want to see both sides of the argument, both sides of the fight, because that's the way that this game is supposed to work. That's how sports is supposed to work.
Yeah, boxing commentary is usually about the worst. It feels like they've just got it set before the fight starts to only talk about one guy and what he's doing, and they'll have you thinking that a fight is completely the opposite of the way it's going.
It's I wouldn't say for all boxing, but it is for certain boxing commentators. But I'm not gonna throw no names out. We ain't gonna do that.
Yeah.
But Tristan, where can the people find you on social media? Oh, and when's your next upcoming fight?
Planning on January. I'm thinking January, but there's a couple different things in the works. I'm still waiting to hear back on some things. Could be earlier, could be later. Who knows? I don't. The plan is to be at 185, but you start talking about title opportunities. I fought at 205 before, so
you have.
We'll see how it goes. I'll be ready regardless of when it is. Back to the gym this week. just back to trying to get better. So
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And when do you feel like you'd be comfortable to turn pro? Will it be 2022, the year that Tristan Scarborough turns professional?
I get that question a lot, and where I'm at right now, I don't really think that it's right for me to be the one that answers it. So I'll leave it at whenever my coaches feel ready, because as a fighter, you're pretty confident. So if you ask me, I'd be like, oh, I can step up to pro and fight right now. What do you mean? Like I'll fight anybody. But that's why you keep people, critical thinkers and ones who know you. You got to keep those people around to tell you, maybe not this one. Maybe take another fight. We'll see how it goes. So it could. I mean, it very well could be. We'll see how many more fights I can get in. In the coming months, and we'll see where I'm at then.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Where can the people find you on social media, Instagram, Facebook? And I cannot wait to see your next upcoming fight. It's gonna be a good one, man.
Yep, I appreciate you. So on Instagram, it's just Tristan Scarborough, no spaces. Facebook, Tristan Scarborough with a space in between, as is Facebook policy, I guess you'll say. But also, you can keep up with me on the Hobbs JW MMA Instagram page. We're constantly posting stuff of training footage and stuff like that. And if you're in the area, come give it a try out. Get to train with some great fighters and a great coach in Madison Hobbs. And if fighting's what you want to do, we can definitely get you there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, thank you, Tristan, for giving us a few moments of your time. You have an incredible week.
You as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Appreciate you, Tristan, man. Thank you.
Of course, bro.
Thank you, man. You have a blessed one, bro.
You too. Have a good day.
You too. Peace.